And what can be done to better protect journalists, and what role can an organisation like the Council of Europe play in this process?
Well, we all know the mantra. We do all know the mantra that journalism is a foundational pillar, or media freedom and journalism is a foundational pillar of democracy. So anyone who's in the business of protecting and entrenching democracy has a role to play in this regard. Now, the Council of Europe is obviously an outside institution that is a little bit removed from these processes, as all international organizations are. But there are important works to be done, I think, on the political front within the Council of Europe and in terms of monitoring these threats to journalism. The European Court of Human Rights has done a fantastic job, I think. It sets out some core principles. So there's the judicial protection of human rights of journalists as such, but then this protection is too far removed from the everyday lives of those journalists. In relation to Strasbourg and the court, I think the court could also think more strategically about how it delivers remedies. In a book that has been launched by Council of Europe just this year, I've written about this and looked at whether the European Court's silence on remedies in relation to grave journalistic freedom violations is something that lets the journalists down as well. But politically, the Council of Europe has to speak incredibly loud, and it has to show that this is not just an everyday concern, but a most serious concern for the Council of Europe. And I think every institution has to monitor. There has to be a lot more systematic naming and shaming, and there has to be a lot more documentation gathering to threats to both to journalists as such and in relation to the profession of journalism, in relation to independence of public broadcasters. I think that's an area where Council of Europe should play a much more of a serious role, for example, in monitoring the journalistic environment provided both by public broadcasters and also private ones.
In the age of the internet, when there's so much information available freely, why should we be overly concerned about the threat to journalistic freedom when people have access to social media, blogs and all kinds of other things?
This is a good question, and I think it's a question that has confused many people because we now use terms such as citizen journalists or user-generated content and so on. So there's a lot of discussion and debate within the journalism profession. But imagine, it's a bit like saying, if we have a lot of off-the-counter drugs, do we need doctors? What is the use of having doctors if we can access all these drugs ourselves? So I think the question comes really close to that. The amount of information doesn't mean that it is a reliable, authentic, credible, fact-checked journalistic profession. This is an opportunity for individuals and citizens to express themselves, but there's a lot of risk in relation to the use of social media by all kinds of actors who would spin and who would use it in order to advance a particular commercial or a political kind of interest. This is where journalists come in. They make this information credible and reliable for us. They go into the social media, to Twitter, to all kinds of sources, to do fact-checking. There's a huge question about authenticity of information and also reliability of information. So a lot of information produced by a wide range of actors actually makes the job of journalists even more important than before. So I think the role of journalists have become increasingly important with the advent of social media, and it is not that they should have a less role to play, because we have millions of voices telling us all kinds of things that we have no idea of checking for ourselves whether they're independent, authentic, and reliable information.